In this episode, we turn to vulnerability scanning in a way that reflects how it really works in living environments rather than in neat diagrams. Because scanning sounds simple until you realize it involves touching real systems that support real business operations. For a beginner, it is easy to imagine vulnerability scanning as pressing a button and receiving a trustworthy list of problems, but strong analysts learn very quickly that the process is more nuanced than that. A scan can be useful, noisy, incomplete, disruptive, or highly valuable, depending on how it is planned, where it runs, what it touches, and how the results are interpreted afterward. That is why special considerations matter so much in CSA+, because defenders are not scanning empty practice networks that nobody depends on. They are scanning active environments full of old systems, critical systems, cloud resources, remote devices, vendor-managed platforms, and business processes that may be affected if the scanning activity is careless, poorly timed, or misunderstood by the teams responsible for keeping those services available. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. At its core, vulnerability scanning is an automated effort to identify known weaknesses, missing updates, insecure configurations, exposed services, or software conditions that may increase risk in a target environment. The scanner compares what it sees against known issues and then produces findings that suggest where security problems may exist. That sounds straightforward, but one of the first special considerations is understanding what a scan is actually telling you. A scan does not prove compromise, it does not automatically reveal business impact, and it does not guarantee that every important weakness has been found. Instead, it gives the defender a structured view of likely problems based on what the scanner could observe at that moment from that position with that level of access. For a new learner, this is a very important mindset shift, because it keeps you from treating scan output like unquestionable truth. A scan is a strong source of evidence, but it is still evidence that must be understood in context, validated when necessary, and tied to actual asset knowledge before a team decides what the findings really mean. One major reason special considerations exist is that scanning is not a purely passive activity. Even when the purpose is defensive and the intent is responsible, the scanner is still interacting with systems, sending requests, checking services, and testing conditions in a live environment. In many cases, that interaction is safe and routine, but some environments respond poorly to aggressive probing, unexpected connection attempts, or unusually high volumes of traffic over a short period of time. A business application under heavy load, a fragile legacy server, or a bandwidth-constrained remote site may behave differently during a scan than it would during normal daily use. That means defenders have to think not only about what they want to discover, but also about how the act of discovery itself might affect availability, performance, and business operations. The mature view is that scanning is part of security operations, not outside them. Because it is happening in the real environment, it must be planned with the same kind of care that good defenders bring to change management, monitoring, and incident handling. Scope is one of the first and most important special considerations, because a scan is only useful if the team understands exactly what is supposed to be included and what falls outside approved boundaries. A careless scan aimed too broadly can create operational problems or even legal issues if it touches systems the organization does not actually control, such as third-party platforms, partner networks, or provider-managed services that are governed by contracts and restrictions. A scan aimed too narrowly creates a different problem, because important assets may be missed, leaving defenders with a false sense of confidence about coverage. That is why teams need to understand network ranges, cloud resources, remote segments, test systems, production systems, and any special exceptions before they begin. This is also where asset discovery connects directly to scanning, because poor visibility leads to poor scope. If the organization does not clearly know what it owns, where it lives, and who manages it, then the scan can easily become incomplete, misdirected, or risky in ways the team did not fully anticipate before the work started. Timing is another major consideration, because the safest and most useful scan is not always the one that happens immediately. Some systems are heavily used during business hours, some process critical overnight jobs, and some support customers across multiple time zones, which means the best scan window depends on understanding when systems are most sensitive to extra activity. A scan that is harmless during one part of the day may contribute to latency, timeouts, or user complaints during another. This does not mean scanning must always wait for a perfect maintenance window, because many organizations scan routinely and safely on normal schedules. But it does mean timing should reflect business reality rather than convenience alone. Analysts and administrators have to think about network congestion, backup windows, database activity, remote site bandwidth, and operational dependencies that may not be obvious from the scanner console. Good timing reduces the risk of self-inflicted disruption and improves trust between security teams and operations teams, because the scan is seen as a planned and professional security activity rather than an unexpected source of instability. Fragile and specialized systems deserve even more care because not every asset responds well to the same scanning approach. Older operating systems, unsupported appliances, embedded devices, and specialized technology can behave unpredictably when confronted with the same probing that a modern workstation or server handles without difficulty. This is especially true in environments that include operational technology, OT, industrial control systems, ICS, medical devices, building systems, or Internet of Things, IoT, equipment, where availability and stability may be more important than aggressive inspection. A scanner configured for broad coverage may accidentally stress these systems or trigger faults simply because the technology was never designed with modern scanning behavior in mind. That does not mean these assets should be ignored, because they often create meaningful risk, but it does mean the organization may need gentler methods, closer coordination with owners, tighter scan settings, or in some cases alternate ways of assessing exposure. Strong defenders recognize that the sensitivity of the target affects how discovery should happen, and they adjust their approach instead of assuming one standard scan profile fits everything equally well. Another special consideration is that visibility during a scan is shaped by network design, architecture, and access controls, which means a clean-looking result may tell only part of the story. Firewalls, segmentation, access lists, load balancers, temporary network conditions, and disconnected remote devices can all affect what the scanner is able to reach or understand. A system that is offline at the moment of the scan may appear invisible, even though it returns later with the same weaknesses still present. A protected subnet may block enough of the scanning activity that important services remain unseen, and cloud resources may appear and disappear quickly enough that scheduled scanning only captures part of the real environment. This matters because beginners sometimes see a short report and assume the environment must be healthy. In reality, a short report may sometimes mean limited coverage rather than low risk. Mature analysts always ask what the scanner could actually see, what it could not see, and whether network conditions or architecture choices may have shaped the findings in ways that make the result look cleaner or more complete than it truly is. The perspective of the scan also matters, because different kinds of visibility answer different security questions. A scan that observes a system from the outside may be very good at showing what an attacker could immediately encounter at the surface, while a scan with approved deeper access may reveal missing updates, local misconfigurations, and software conditions that would never be obvious from a surface view alone. Neither perspective is automatically better in all situations, because they serve different purposes and illuminate different parts of risk. This is why security teams must think carefully about what they are trying to learn before they decide how the scan should be performed, how much access it should use, and what level of system knowledge it needs. Too little visibility can create shallow findings, while excessive access without proper control can create governance problems or unintended operational risk. Even at a beginner level, it is worth understanding that scan results are shaped by viewpoint. What a scanner can report depends heavily on where it stands, what it is allowed to do, and how closely that perspective matches the actual question the organization is trying to answer. False positives and false negatives are another major special consideration, because scanners are powerful but not perfect. A scanner may sometimes infer a vulnerability from a software version, a banner, or a configuration pattern that appears risky even though a control, backport, or environmental condition changes the real situation. At other times, a scanner may miss a weakness because the target was unreachable, the service responded in an unusual way, or the evidence needed for detection was not visible from the chosen scan method. This means scan results should be treated as an informed assessment rather than as infallible truth. Validation becomes especially important for high-impact findings, unusual results, or cases where the operational consequence of acting on the finding is significant. Security teams need enough technical review to confirm that the most important issues are real and relevant before they escalate them aggressively or demand urgent remediation from already busy system owners. This careful review protects trust in the vulnerability management process, because teams are much more likely to respond seriously when the findings they receive are accurate, contextual, and clearly connected to real exposure. Interpreting scan results also requires more than reading a severity label. A finding that looks critical in isolation may deserve lower urgency if the affected system is heavily restricted, not reachable in a meaningful way, or protected by strong compensating controls. On the other hand, a finding with a lower score may deserve rapid attention if it affects an internet-facing system, a critical identity service, or an asset known to be targeted actively in the wild. This is why vulnerability scanning should feed a risk-based decision process rather than a simple race to close the highest numbers first. Scan results are most useful when they are combined with asset criticality, exposure, business function, threat intelligence, and knowledge of how the environment is actually used. For new learners, this helps clarify why scanning is only one part of vulnerability management. The report does not hand the organization a finished priority list. It hands the organization a starting point for judgment, discussion, and decision-making about which weaknesses matter most and why those particular issues should rise above the rest of the backlog. Cloud and third-party environments add another layer of special considerations because the organization may rely on technology it does not fully control in the traditional sense. A company may run workloads in the cloud, depend on platform services, subscribe to software as a service, SaaS, or use provider-managed systems where the underlying infrastructure is not available for the same type of scanning used on internal servers. In these cases, the team has to understand the shared responsibility model and the rules of the service itself before scanning begins. Some services allow certain types of assessment. Some expose security posture through control panels or application programming interface, API, data rather than classic network scanning, and some provider-managed layers are simply outside the customer's direct scanning authority. This matters because defenders can easily overestimate their visibility if they assume every modern environment can be scanned in the same way. A strong analyst learns to ask what part of the stack the organization truly owns, what part the provider manages, and what assessment approach is appropriate for each layer without violating service rules or creating blind confidence. Communication and coordination are also essential special considerations because scanning affects more people than the security team alone. System owners, infrastructure teams, network teams, application teams, and sometimes vendors all need to know what is being scanned, when it will happen, how aggressively it will run, and what types of findings may result. Without that coordination, a normal scan may be mistaken for suspicious activity, or a legitimate service issue may be misdiagnosed because the operations team never knew the scan was scheduled. Communication also helps when exceptions are needed. Some critical systems may require modified settings, narrower scope, or closer observation during the scan, and those adjustments only happen well when the right stakeholders are involved early. This is another reason vulnerability scanning in practice is not just a technical activity. It is an operational process that depends on shared understanding, clear expectations, and professional handling of the relationship between security and the teams who keep business services running day to day. A mature scanning program also treats the scan as part of a cycle rather than as a one-time event. Findings need follow-up, remediation needs verification, and systems need to be reviewed again because environments change continuously. A weakness resolved last month may reappear in a new image, a migrated workload, or a forgotten template, while new assets may enter the environment carrying old problems that were already solved elsewhere. This is why rescanning, trend review, and ongoing adjustment matters so much. The organization wants to know not only what the scanner found today, but whether coverage is improving, whether the same weaknesses keep recurring, and whether changes in the environment are outpacing the scanning strategy itself. Over time, this continuous view helps defenders separate short-term cleanup from real program maturity. The goal is not a single impressive report. The goal is a repeatable, trusted process that keeps pace with how the environment evolves and how attackers shift toward the easiest available weaknesses. By the end of this discussion, vulnerability scanning should feel much more like a disciplined operational activity and much less like a simple push-button task. The special considerations are what make the difference between scanning that creates useful, trusted, and actionable insight and scanning that creates noise, friction, incomplete coverage, or even service disruption. Scope, timing, fragility of systems, network visibility, scan perspective, validation of results, cloud complexity, and communication with stakeholders all shape what the scan will truly accomplish. For a CISA Plus learner, the biggest takeaway is that scanning is valuable precisely because it works in live environments, but that same fact is why it must be planned and interpreted carefully. Once you understand that balance, you begin to think like a stronger analyst, one who sees scanning not as a mechanical task to be completed, but as a careful security practice that must align with business reality if it is going to reduce risk instead of merely generating reports.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.